Or it could be just something you're passionate about that you just do on the side, knowing that it might generate a little income, but you love doing it so much that you keep doing it. It doesn't bother you that you're putting time into it.
Add on to that the Lego that is social media and what social media has opened up to. I mean, some people didn't realize that, granted, even though the distribution platform they don't own, they ultimately did build up audiences in case that they were then able to monetize, and some people fall into it.
Welcome to episode 9 of This is the Way with Artin and Michael. We started this podcast to help pave the way for others who are in the same shoes we were in 10, 15 years ago. And we want to do this by sharing our experience, insights, and knowledge around career growth, side hustles, and startups. Michael, what are we covering today?
Today, we're almost more answering a question, more so than the other ones, maybe in the topics we're going through. Today, we want to ask the question and say, should everyone have a side hustle? What do you think?
I mean, maybe not everybody, but we should say most people should have a side hustle, especially people that are in white-collar jobs early in their career or middle management. Not to say that, if you don't have a white-collar job, you shouldn't have a side hustle. Because I think, around LA, if you're a waitress or a waiter, most likely you have a side hustle, which is you're going to auditions to try to get into the acting career, which is, a side hustle at the time.
It's so true. That's a great way to put it. It actually made me think about it. Then I'm like, man, when I was going to college, was our job our side hustle? But no, I think the one you mentioned, Hollywood, is great. Well, let's do some quick definition of side hustle for those not familiar with it. Which ultimately, a side hustle is pretty much that thing that you are looking at, often to pull in some extra cash, but at other times it's the thing that you're thinking you might want to pursue long term. But at this point, it's not a full-time job for you, and it's not something that you can do full-time. So it's a side hustle that maybe one day will become a full-time gig. And at that point, it's not really a hustle anymore. It's your cash flow. It's what's bringing it in.
Yeah. Or it could be just something you're passionate about that you just do on the side, knowing that it might generate a little income, but you love doing it so much that you keep doing it. It doesn't bother you that you're putting time into it.
I call that a hobby.
What if you're actually generating money from it?
Yeah, that's good. It's a hobby with some extra cash flow, but I hear you. And I think that's the thing. It's side hustle. Any people could call anything side hustle. Heck, a lot of people have side hustles that are actually losing money. So the criteria isn't always making money either. But let's do a quick rapid fire here of some examples of different types of side hustles. So I'll start and I'll say consulting. What do you got?
Coaching.
Okay. Ebook.
Starting a podcast like we're doing. This is our side hustle.
Excellent. That's true. I'll say online course.
Writing or just freelancing in general. It could be writing, editing, bookkeeping, graphic design, web design, whatever. I mean, the freelancing category is pretty big, so it could be one of those.
Okay, fair. Uber driver?
Oh yeah, that's definitely a pretty lucrative side gig for some people. That's become their main gig, actually.
Yeah, good point. Lucrative. I'd put parentheses on, but yes, good.
Yes, I mean, it's perspective matters, but. For some people, I would say, my sister has a side gig, which is selling arts and crafts stuff on Etsy. So that's kind of another side gig.
That's a fair. I guess then theoretically you could call my Airbnb also a side, hustle, as it's something that I'm, working on. So
it is. I mean, it's doesn't take up your entire time, so definitely it's a side thing, but it's a good one. I would say maybe this falls into freelancing, but maybe not. But social media management, a lot of people don't have the time, so they hire people part-time to handle their social media. So that could be someone's side gig if they're passionate about social media.
And especially because, so many people, especially they grew up with it. It's a skill that they have. It's like, hey, why not? In fact, I think a lot of businesses might benefit from trying to find more people who do that, more natively, if you want to call it that. I think related to social media can be affiliate marketing. And, I think what we're honing in here is really, any business on the side that isn't quite viable yet to go, full time. And we were talking about this before. When you think about side hustles, the OGs, you were mentioning before, DJing, as one of those things. And then I was mentioning, photography, and then we also said videography. So like those are the original gangsters, if you will, that were around before, this gig economy got popular, because gig economy is something that really happened during the Great Recession. So it's like 15 years old. And that's when ultimately you had these, what was originally, well, first off, you had people looking for more income in a time period where they didn't have a lot of income coming in. But at the same time, there was also this increase in some of these websites that helped connect people, because again, something that you were mentioning earlier is the origination of a lot of these hustles, which you were talking about offshore. If you want to kind of describe that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think when I think about especially freelancing side gigs, I feel like that became a thing because individuals being able to use offshore resources at much lower cost to you became a big thing during the Great Recession or around that time as well. Where, for me, when I had the startup, I used offshore regularly, whether it was a small little project or actually offshoring complete dev teams back in the day. So I feel like it really took on. And as offshore freelancing became a thing, it slowly evolved. And now it's just a global thing where anybody can tap into resources. And obviously, depending on what you're looking for, different areas in the world have specialties in those areas based on the price and your budget that you're looking for a specific project. So it's interesting to see how it's evolved and how even my own usage of it has evolved, where now I might look more into hiring someone from the US, because it just seems like it'll get done faster because there's no communication barrier. Not that people outside of US don't have the talent. It's just communication might become an issue, and time zones might become an issue. So it's very interesting how that whole area has evolved. And given where the economy is at now, it's kind of like it's not as bad as 2007, 8, or 9, but we're in this weird place where a lot of layoffs are happening. You can easily see a lot of people saying, I'm going to take a pause from the workplace and especially corporate world, and I'm going to give one of these things a shot and see if I can make it a full-time thing and be my own boss.
Yeah, no, I know we both follow somebody on LinkedIn, Justin Welsh, and obviously LinkedIn is full of that. In fact, I feel like LinkedIn is the home of everybody doing a side hustle these days. But Justin Welsh focuses heavily on solopreneurship, with the idea of people taking this and being able to parlay it into that. And one of the things he points out, and I completely agree with, is these are the individuals who are top performers in their jobs. Like at that point, if they're staying out as a top performer, their skills, usually there's a specific skill set or 2 or 3 or 4, but also their drive generally makes them a perfect fit for, this pivot into something else. And so, yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I'm curious, when you mentioned some of the things that you might acquire as far as from this market, what are some examples of some recent things that you actually leveraged, somebody on a part-time basis for, or a gig basis?
The most recent example would be our animated logo for this podcast. That was somebody that I kind of worked with offshore, that I contacted again, said, hey, I need help with an animated logo. Can you use some of the AI tools and all that out there? Sure you can, but it kind of goes back to the same argument or thing we talked about in the previous episode, where if you're not a regular user of some of these AI tools, it's still very easier to just give it to somebody and let them do it, even if they use the AI tool. It's like, I don't care. Just give me what I'm looking for. So that was the most recent example. When I was publishing the book, I used quite a lot of people that had side hustles or were kind of in that community of freelancers, whether it was helping me design the art and the cover of the book, helping me find editor of the book. So it's been a huge help. There's a lot of things that I don't think I would have been able to accomplish without these tools that actually give us everybody a platform to exchange services around the world.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I recently used for financial forecasting and some analysis I was trying to pull together as I was looking at a business to buy, just because like I knew they'd be able to do it so much faster than I could. That said, do you have an example of a horror story when you were leveraging somebody for some sort of a service you were paying for? Or has it all been good for you?
Recently has been good. And early on, there were a bunch of horror stories because I didn't actually know how to go about selecting the right person or company that was offering a service, and some of the like tricks of the trade. Because it's very easy to manufacture like star ratings in these platforms. I didn't know that back then. So just understanding one, how to analyze reviews of people on these platforms. Because once you figure it out, you can spot fake reviews and see how somebody's reviews are manufactured. Upwork does a really good job of showing lifetime earnings, which is a very good proxy to say, are you really sure you had 5 stars and 20 reviews, but how come the earnings aren't there? So at least you can use that. I also learned how to not just reward a project all at once. So if it's a big project, I always said, okay, you have the project, but it's going to have milestones. I'm going to give you a small piece just to see how we work together. How's your communication? Your review said your communications are good, but is it actually good, or is that a fake review? So those type of things, as I learned over time, the first, I would say a year or so that I started using freelance services, I got bit a few times, but then because I learned. So I would say I've never had an issue in the last 10 plus years.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's funny, the approach you just mentioned about how you look at the awarding the project and releasing the money. That's how construction, typically also will work as well. So it's funny how sometimes, one business starts to inform the other one. When we mentioned, like gig economy, I think, that and obviously the Great Recession were a couple of things that led to popularity of side hustles. And I think you ultimately alluded to another when you mentioned the people getting laid off on the career side. I think that's another one where people just kind of get fed up and they're just like, you know what? No, I want to have, some more options. But what would be some other examples that you think of that's led to the popularity of side hustles in like recent years? Because I feel like it's gotten even more prominent.
I think the internet has just made it so easy to supplement your income. When I say easy, it's still work. You still have to hustle and put in the work, but it's possible. So people that are able to learn and have the mindset of, I'm going to make this happen, and I'm going to make this side thing a full-time thing, they figure it out. And they know that by doing that, the incentive is a more freedom, whether it's freedom of travel and work from anywhere you want, or more financial freedom and less of a headache of dealing with office politics. Like those type of freedoms become an incentive for somebody to say, I'm going to give this a shot. And then people that are afraid to give this a shot, what better kick in the butt than getting laid off and say, okay, well, I have nothing to be afraid about now. I just got laid off. I got a severance package. I'm good for 6 months or whatever the time is. Let me give this a shot. And some percentage of that population that gives it a shot becomes successful at it. And you see it, examples on a daily basis, whether it's, LinkedIn examples or just reading about them. I think it's just technology is enabling all this to happen. And that just comes down to people's desire and motivation if they want to take advantage of the tools.
Yeah, it's interesting because even when you mentioned the internet, I think, add on to that the Lego that is social media and what social media has opened up to. I mean, some people didn't realize that, granted, even though the distribution platform they don't own, they ultimately did build up audiences in case that they were then able to monetize. And, some people fall into it that way or realize, hey, I could leverage this and, voila, I'm making a lot of money out there. Because while sure, people know Kardashians, as far as big social media stars, there's names that somebody would say we'd have no clue who they are, but they found their niche and they're able to sell them one way or another, or at least just be them, and then have, brands or others come in and say, hey, we'll pay you X. If you just mention this, you get $1,000, which is pretty.
Yeah. Micro influencers is a big trend where you have, 10,000 to 100,000 followers. So relatively small compared to like big influencers, but their audience is so niche and targeted that brands know that your conversion rate is going to be much higher than a general population influencer.
A good point. Something else that I just realized here now too is that over the last few years, that this concept has definitely hit mainstream, because when you look at the careers of what kids want, like you are now having show up there, basically a YouTube, not star, but in essence, having their YouTube channel. And then influencer is actually another one on there. Like kids are actually saying, this is what I want. Sometimes those sound like the easier one because they look so fun, even though there's a lot of work that has to go behind the scenes on those. But just funny to think about that.
Yeah, I remember talking to my wife's friend's sons who are 10, 11 years old, and they're all into gaming, and they watch the big gaming influencers on YouTube just to see how they play the game. I asked them, I said, okay, you guys are about to enter middle school, so what do you guys want to be? Like what? Immediately the answer was, oh, YouTube influencers. Like, what, is that even a question? Like they already know what they want to be. Now we'll see how that changes as they go into high school and college, but it's very true. Kids these days look at creators and influencers as a legit career.
I mean, and if you look at where they spend the majority of their time, I mean, I could say with my kiddos, it's like, these are the people and what they're watching. In fact, I'll have to send you a video later. It's like, there's this I forget the term. It's an acronym that stands for these videos people like to watch because they're like, they have a lot of really interesting editing and sounds and other stuff. And like kids, like, I don't know if your kids have ever watched the thing where a vehicle rolls over something and it makes a sound and you see it explode. But like,
yeah. Both Eric and Ava get obsessed over that. And I just sit there and watch. I'm like, what is the joy of watching bottles pop and water bottles are cracking? It's just weird.
But it is. But I'll send you this other one that somebody put together. And it's like 13 million, views for what this person's doing, or not views, 13 million subscribers, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, for what they're doing. It's like, it's ridiculous.
My wife's nephews, at some point, they were obsessed by watching this YouTube channel that was basically like, it looked like a security camera footage of dump trucks just coming in and dumping their load and then leaving. And they're just like watching. What are you watching here?
As you say that, it's like right here, once more, for anybody listening, it's like, well, there is another idea that you might not have thought was going to be great, but the right placed video cameras somewhere people want to watch. I mean, some people, when there's these songs, I forget the name of the song right now, but recently somebody took, and they've done it a couple times actually, for Friday, it was a popular cello version of, again, I'm going blank on the song, but somebody took that song and they put it on a loop. And now it has several million viewers of it. And granted, everything gets paid differently on YouTube. That's probably not one that's going to get you a really high rate because it doesn't fall into their sweet spot niches. But like they're finding ways to take this thing, quickly put it out there and make some money on it. It's pretty incredible.
I'll tell you another, which I think is pretty dumb, but it had millions of views. When Eric was like between 2 and 3, for some reason, he got obsessed with ceiling fans. So then and it started off by a drive to Palm Springs and seeing the big, the windmills that generate electricity as you go into Palm Springs. Then somehow randomly on YouTube, this video came up where this guy is obsessed with ceiling fans. So his garage has hundreds of ceiling fans. It's more like a warehouse, hundreds of ceiling fans on the ceiling. And he's kind of has different switchers where like one section turns on, one section. So this video, and he has one for every year because he updates models. He just goes through and clicks them on. And Eric was obsessed. He would sit there and just watch fans spinning.
That's crazy.
I have no idea what the purpose of this is. Doesn't seem like it's a dangerous video, and it calms him down. So let's just Keep him, let him watch it as long as he's calm.
Yeah, I would have never thought about that. Our kids did like watching the fan, but I never thought about the videos on the fans. Yeah, I think this is another thing too, as you talk about our kids, because something I think we both want to foster even more, and right now it's what I'm trying to foster within my kids and teach them some of these skills, and literally, in essence, today get them to have these side hustles. And like for my oldest Maverick, he's 11, and so far, and you've helped him in his entrepreneurial journey, but so far it's like he's had like his Etsy where he went and sold like a couple of things on there. He didn't make a lot of money on it, but he did it and he made something on it. And it's like, oh, that's that taste, if you will. And then now it's his YouTube he's doing. And he has a video that he just released a couple of days ago. And in one day, granted, this is unique so far for him, but in one day, he got 2,000 views on this video. And it's like, that's actually good. So trying to foster it. But what I'm trying to teach him and he does, I'm like, okay, let's look at, your retention. And how long people are saying, where are you losing them? Okay, why are we losing them? Let's use that to make the next video hit 4,000 or, get even more likes and stuff on it. So I do think like side hustles make it even easier today to teach kids about entrepreneurship and try to grow that. And that in its own right, I think is a huge benefit, because a lot of people who are nervous and don't necessarily think about pursuing it often don't, because the accessibility to it when they were younger, if they didn't have a parent or somebody who had that sort of mentality, might not have gone down that pathway.
I mean, you're touching on, benefits and why should everybody, going back to the original question of this episode, why should everybody or most people have a side hustle? That is a perfect reason. If you want to teach your kids entrepreneurship and the value of building and doing things on their own and figuring it out, being resourceful, is a huge lesson that probably they will never learn in school, since that's not what curriculum at schools teach. Obviously, like extra income and building up your savings is a obvious benefit.
Yeah.
One of the benefits for me, which was not something that I thought about, like it wasn't a strategic thing that I did. In hindsight, I realized what was happening, which was, at work at Disney, I wasn't getting the opportunity to learn or get exposed to things that I wanted to. So by pursuing the side hustles and the startups on the side, put me in the driver's seat. I was able to get exposed to whatever I wanted to get exposed to and learn, because we were building a startup, a platform, figuring out how to market it, sell it, branding, like all of that is nothing that I would get exposed to at Disney, because that was not the box I was in. So side hustle just lets you break out of that box and learn whatever you want to learn. And the weird thing that happens is you can then leverage those learnings. And if you decide that, hey, the side thing was fun, but I think I'm happier at work. I'm happier being an employee at a corporate world or small companies, which is totally fine. At the end of the day, happiness is what matters. But learning those things on the side can actually help you excel your career progression in a company. So to me, it's probably not a benefit talked about as often as I think it should, but it definitely was beneficial for me.
Yeah, and just to build on that too, I know we've touched on before, this idea of motivation, and Daniel Pink in his book Drive talks about, the three core things that ultimately make up motivation, which is, having autonomy, purpose, and mastery. And for a lot of people in their jobs, they might not be getting all of those. They may not get the autonomy because they may have a micromanager, or just somebody who wants every decision run by them, which is unfortunate. But with that too, that also means it sometimes takes away that mastery piece of it too. Or people are just in a job for a period of time and they're not growing anymore. Some because of themselves, some because I'd say all because of themselves, because I think people should be empowered to break free. But ultimately, and the other one is with purpose. Well, sometimes you end up down a career and all of a sudden it's, unless you connect that deep purpose to it and find a way to, which, some people do, you could be a janitor and you could see purpose in your job. But I think a side hustle gives people actually an area to be able to have autonomy, mastery, and purpose that can actually help their overall happiness in life. Because if they just relied on their job for it and didn't have the other, I think they'd be less fulfilled. That keeps them alive, which actually can benefit the job too, because they get the person sticking around there longer, even though I'd rather they break free and find the job that allows, those components plus do a side hustle at the same time, because then they're really going to be, firing on all cylinders.
I mean, if you think about human history and human evolution, humans are builders. And that's what kind of feels like progress. So if you have a job that's not letting you build, and it could be many jobs, fulfilling that what's in your DNA to build is what a side gig allows you to do, which then makes you a happier person and not a bitter person working at a job that they don't like. So definitely happiness level gets impacted by the right side hustle, because it just touches your inner core and that DNA. And it could be something you're even passionate about. I mean, we talked about DJing and photography. I mean, if you're passionate about music, DJing, is a fun way to do it. What also happens, and not every side hustle and side gig, but some of them allow you to build your own personal brand, because just the nature of the side hustle. So it actually, in a weird way, it becomes like an insurance policy. Because usually what happens is, as soon as somebody doesn't like their job or they get laid off, that's when they start networking and trying to find their next role. Well, if you're already building a personal brand and networking just organically, if that thing happens, a layoff or a change where you're not happy, that shouldn't be the trigger. The side hustle is already there building that for you.
I think, as you said, that ultimately it comes down to like not having your eggs in a single basket. And I think a lot of people end up doing that with their careers, including not doing enough to network just within their industry and build, more alliances and advocates, that way. So I do agree that this becomes that great added benefit, but also I almost wish when people went through school, and I know we keep promising one on education we'll do in the future, but it's like, to me, when kids come out of I wish that was literally something that you were doing, even in high school, like getting people to think that way, but education set up in more of a way that, I was looking at people to get them into the traditional workforce. But I think that'd be huge for all these reasons that we're hitting on. But let's talk about the downsides, though. What are the downsides against, why shouldn't people have a side hustle?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to play devil's advocate, there's always pros and cons to everything. So the easy one is just wellness and mental and physical wellness. Because if you have a side hustle or side gig, it just means that you're working longer hours. So that's why it becomes important that what you're doing on that side, you're really passionate about and like doing. Otherwise, it's going to feel like a chore, and it might start off good, but it's not sustainable. And you're going to start getting burnout, which now is going to have a negative effect. Instead of taking the new skills you're learning and parlaying that for promotions or anything like that, now it's going to have a negative impact, and it might prevent you from promotion. So I think you have to make sure that that side hustle is something you enjoy. Now, obviously, there's some population that side hustle is a necessity. So I'm going to carve that out and say, if it's a necessity, then it's just now you're in survival mode. It doesn't matter. But if it's not a necessity, that's where mental health and wellness comes into play. That's one easy one to say that one of the downsides.
What you just said, though, is really interesting and not something we need to dive into now, but I just still wanted to highlight it, is that there's something that happens as part of the human condition, that when something is about survival and there is something that you need to pursue, because if you don't pursue it, you don't survive. It's interesting how humans are able to push through certain pain in a different way than when there is the option. So, but it is really interesting there, what you highlighted. Maybe we got to have that topic in the future, because it is really interesting, that talks about how sometimes humans and our own psychology sets limits on ourselves that aren't there when we don't have other options, which is really interesting. Honing in on the right idea, that in its own self can be challenging for a lot because they overthink it. But I like to look at it this way: is if you say, if you make a list of things you're really good at, preferably a list of things that other people come to you for already and ask you for your help on. Well, you've just identified key areas that you might want to pursue. Now take that list and ask yourself whether or not this is something that somebody is willing to pay for. Not sure? Ask them if they'd be willing to pay for it. And there was an example I remember when I took a course with Ramit Sethi. What he had talked about is, he's like, I'm really good at ironing shirts. He goes, but people may not necessarily want to, pay me, at least not what he's looking for. It's not going to be something he can make a living on long term. But if you look at some of your other skills, like say, for example, you are really good at Excel. And right now, if somebody goes to, I think it's Miss Excel on Instagram, it's crazy. This person who's making a couple $1 million a year because they make these little Instagram and TikTok videos on tips and tricks for Excel. Not only do they make money on there, but then they've taken that and they're turning it into courses as well. So somebody who's really good in finance might not have thought about that as a way that they could turn it into a career, but this person's done it at $2 million a year. So just starting off and building on it each, day is key. But I think that's ultimately how you pick. You just got to say, here are the skills, and whether or not I can actually monetize those skills, and whether or not they're the big ones that are going to get you, the million potential, whether it's a small one. I think that's where you have to look at what you're trying to get out of it. All right. I think we're about done here. Artin, anything else you want to add?
No, that's it. I think just like every episode, please subscribe, like, share, however you can do to support us. And if there's any specific topic or questions you had, just feel free to comment or send us an email.
We will see you all next time. This is the way.
This is the way.
See you, Art.